Hi everyone. I want to welcome you to the first night for ASAP's network meeting. We're all back together again tonight to start with a reception, which is really part of our vision for this event, which is a time for us to connect, to celebrate, and to recharge. We're going to be going into our session tonight, which is about our member appreciation. And at ASAP, there's not a better place for us to start. And I think after if you've been doing adaptation work for 18 months or 5 years or 10 years or 2 decades, there's nothing that keeps us going the way that each other do. And everything that we do at ASAP is really driven by the work that the members put into this network and put into the field and put into the relationships with each other. And so we're going to be doing that appreciation. We're also going to have a little talk show at the second half of this, which is going to be an opportunity to have a few of the members talk about what's been going on in their adaptation year. What are some career changes? What are some new programs that are launching? What does it mean to be looking forward to a future in adaptation? And so we hope that the appreciation, the chance we're going to have to do some networking in some small groups, and those stories from our peers and colleagues is going to kick off this network meeting in a very ASAP-y way. Before we do that, though, we want to make sure that everybody is getting all the tech help that they need. So just from the top, for folks who may not know me, I'm Beth Gibbons. I'm the Executive Director here at the American Society of Adaptation Professionals. I use she, her pronouns, and I have the honor of being based in Southeast Michigan, which is the ancestral and the contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe people, the Three Fire Keepers, the Wyandot, Potawatomi, and Ottawa and the Ojibwa, and also the Wyandot. And I'm joined tonight by ASAP staff that are supporting this event and supporting all of ASAP's work. Brianna Nels, and Rachel Jacobson. I wouldn't count on her too much. Looks like she's into the whiskey already, so it's questionable, but I think she's gonna run the breakout room, so we'll see what happens. That'll be great. And we're also joined by Chicharelli, who is a program assistant with us here at ASAP. So if you're running into any questions about how to be connecting, you can use a helpline. The helpline will get you to Brianna Nels. If you are not already comfortable with Zoom, go ahead and message Brianna or message Rachel, and we'll make sure to help you out and get you through anything that you need for the rest of our network meeting tonight and on other days. And then we also are on Slack. And so if you're not sure how to get into Slack, here's some quick instructions for you. Navigate to adaptpros.slack.com. Find the hashtag network meeting 2021 channel, and you'll find a whole live conversation there. So you're welcome to participate in our chat conversation here in the Zoom room. You also are welcome to go into the Slack channel, and any conversations that get started here tonight or in other parts of the network meeting, feel free to pick those up in the chat. I'm sorry, in the Slack. Just a little bit about where we're heading. Over the next couple of days, we have 3 types of sessions. We are going to be having a plenary session tomorrow. This is at the heart of the network meeting, a keynote on how do we advance our climate adaptation work in this time of urgency while holding central justice and equity in our work. We're going to have member-led interest groups taking place on Tuesday. It's an opportunity Tuesday morning and Tuesday evening, Eastern time. Will be times for members to be sharing with one another their work. We have ASAP 101 sessions, so get involved in the network, know how we're doing our work in the background, the governance of the organization, but also all of the member-led interest groups. And then we have some networking meals, times to get together and chat with folks one-on-one. Throughout the course of your time here, you should be looking towards the ASAP network meeting connection grid. It'll be your guide to the different rooms that you need to be heading to. This is ASAP, so we keep things as low tech as we can so they're as accessible as possible. So this is in a Google Doc, and everything is going to be in Zoom meetings. So hopefully you should be comfortable with all those formats. But if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Tuesday, we're going to kick off. So you're here, today's, in case you don't know, it's Monday, September 13th. It is evening on the East Coast. It is afternoon on the West Coast. Tomorrow, when you come back, we kick off at 10 a.m. Eastern time for member-led sessions. We know that's too early, right, for our Pacific folks, but we have our member-led sessions that frame the meeting. So there's morning sessions and there's evening sessions. So you'll have a chance to catch some of those no matter what time zone you're in. In the middle of the day is, of course, our Jedi session, the time that we hope will work for all. And then on Wednesday, we come back with a networking breakfast, and then we have our ASAP 101s from 11 a.m. through 2 p.m., and we'll wrap up with a closing celebration. So that is the network meeting in a nutshell, what you can expect us into our member appreciation reception. And, as we think about this section, what we want to be keeping in mind are ways of being together while we're apart. So being present, we hope you'll have your videos on throughout this conversation. Make sure to take care of yourself and take care to respect others. So these are our principles that we always hold close, that we're acting in trust, that we're reciprocating what we hope to receive from one another. And then these values of ASAP, being an open access and a member-led space. And let's see, I am going back one here. With that in mind, as we think about coming into this space of being together apart, I'm really happy to welcome Emily Wasley to join me in this opening. Emily Wasley is ASAP's board president. She joined as board president early in 2021, and I have been honored to get to work closely with her over the course of this year. And Emily, thanks so much for joining us this afternoon and evening, and I'd love to welcome you into the space.
Thanks, Beth, and thank you all for joining us today. What a great group. I would love to, I'm Emily Wasley. I am board president of ASAP, but I'm also the practice lead for climate risk adaptation and resilience at WSP. I use she, her pronouns, and I sit on the Ohlone People's Land here in Oakland, California. And as Beth mentioned, I was inaugurated in January to the ASAP board as president, shortly after Biden and Harris were inaugurated. And what an exciting time it was, and it still is. I feel so grateful to be part of this amazing network that is collaborative, that is open, that is trusting of each other. And I have no other place that I can call home other than a network like this. So I am forever grateful for our members. I can connect with you all on any topic related to adaptation or resilience, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I love that. And I tap into the network all the time for asking key questions, seeing where we are in the market, where trends are heading. And I'm just so grateful for the number of members that we have and the dedication that you all have to ASAP. I also want to thank the board and our board members. I always learn something new from each board member that I talk to, that I connect with, at either our quarterly board meetings or on a more one-on-one basis. And so grateful for their time and their dedication to the governance of our network. And then last but definitely not least, so grateful for the ASAP staff. This network would not be possible without Beth and her leadership, and Brianna and Rachel and so many others that have given their time, their dedication, and their energy and love towards ASAP. You can feel it in every conversation that I have with them, and I'm just so grateful. These are also really challenging times, and I hope that you all find some time to connect with people within ASAP to share struggles, share shoulders, but also share laughs. And I think that's what we're here today to share gratitude and some amazing stories that have happened over the past year. So let me stop there and see if our banter will continue, Beth.
Oh, thanks, Emily. I love this. It's always I think it's one of the highlights for me to get to have regular conversations with you. I would say over the last year, there's been a lot that you've been teaching me about, one, my personal resilience, how I take care of myself and my well-being, as somebody who loves her work, but is also carrying a lot of pressure and a lot of the future. In many ways, it feels like us out here recognizing the reality of where we're heading can be heavy. And I have just so much respect for the way that you've always centered personal resilience in your own life, Emily. And I think, I'd love to just ask, like, what do you see for yourself as we're coming through a season of change right now? We're coming into the fall, and we're coming, I think, into like a time of opportunity. And how are you keeping yourself, resilient, your own personal resilience today?
That is a great question. And Beth, I'm not the perfect resilience person. I am, I guess, perfectly imperfect. And so I like to put that out there first to say that there are strategies that I always recommend, and some I take to heart and some I don't. And so I am a work in progress for sure. But kind of the ways that I really try to make sure that there is time spent for self-care and self-reflection. One of the biggest components that got lost during COVID was exercise for me. And so I have committed to moving my body in some way for 30 minutes a day, every day. And that in itself gives me so much more energy to keep going, to show up at work, to be there for my colleagues. But I also make a conscious effort to turn off on weekends. I need to refresh, as many of you do. And a lot of times when we're working so hard on a topic that is so complex, that it feels like taking a weekend off is not appropriate, but weekends are very precious to me. So I make sure that I take time off. I get out in nature. I connect with my bubble folks, which are either in my building or my family or friends, to make sure that we're safe during COVID. And just make sure that I have, healthy boundaries at work. That can be a challenge as a consultant, but one that I have been hopefully pretty effective at.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Yeah, I think that I take that to heart as well. I think COVID allowed me to slow down a little bit in my free time because you couldn't do anything. And now I've felt the tension of trying to pack so much more into the same number of hours of days. And so as we come into this season of change, thinking about that, how I do it in my own life. Just one thing I want to call out before we head into our breakouts for conversations and chances to do some meet and greet. Emily Wasley, you had a pretty exciting appointment that happened recently for an upcoming report. Do you want to tell us about it?
Sure. And then I'd love to hear about your also appointment. So I was nominated and selected to be a chapter author for the Adaptation and Resilience chapter of the next National Climate Assessment, NCA 5. I'm super honored, and this is truly a bucket list item for me because the NCA means so much to so many people, and it's so informative, and it takes so long. I worked at the U.S. Global Change Research Program for 4.5 years, and it takes so long to really get that science-based and science-informed assessment done. So I'm super excited about that. And I know that there are many others on this call today that also either have in the past been authors or have been selected for this one. But Beth has been selected for
the Midwest chapter. That's right. Yeah, so I'm really excited. I don't know that I've ever been so humbled by something in my adaptation professional career as to be nominated and selected, appointed to the National Climate Assessment Midwest chapter. I'm really excited to find the other ASAP members who are going to be on the NCA because I think it's a sign that we're going to be able to take this report that is so important and really pull it into being this usable and useful document for our work going forward. And so to me, I know that that accomplishment would never be possible without the support of this network. And I would say the support that I get from people like Emily to be able to facilitate and love the work that I do in the network, and then to also have the opportunity to continue being an expert in the field that I care so deeply about. And so I appreciate that. And I appreciate that opportunity to wear both hats. I know that people are looking around the room. I hope you're using the chat to strike up conversations with those whom you know, and perhaps folks who you only know a little and you're excited to get together with over the next couple hours and the next few days. And back to our welcome back to the main room, everybody. So we want to create a little bit of space for folks to take this time for sharing appreciation stories of work that they may have known about already that other members were doing, or perhaps something that you just learned about. And so if there's any stories out there that folks want to throw up and share, we'd love to hear them. And we're then going to share some appreciation of some of our member group leaders as well. Anybody out there with a story they want to tell?
I can jump in first with the story that Anna Mcginn submitted for us, but she unfortunately wasn't able to join us tonight, but she wanted to take a minute to appreciate Maria, and I think Maria is here. Yes, hi Maria. So Anna Mcginn is one of our leadership team members from the Policy Practice Member-Led Interest Group, and Anna is the policy member or manager at the Environmental and Energy Study Institute in Washington, D.C. And Anna wanted to recognize Maria Hart. Maria Hart is the principal planner with Nomad Planners in Madison, Wisconsin. And Maria and Anna have gotten connected through ASAP's Policy Practice Member-Led Interest Group. And it's so great to work with Maria and Anna, and I'm really excited to share this note from Anna to Maria. So Anna submitted this note to me yesterday. So here's to you, Maria. So from Anna, the opportunity to pause and express appreciation for fellow ASAP members is one of the reasons this is such a great network. While I'm so thankful for the many people I've met and worked through with ASAP, I wanted to take a couple of minutes to share one particular story of appreciation for Maria Hart. I met Maria through the Policy Practice Member-Led Interest Group, and so I was excited when Rachel suggested to loop Maria into an ongoing project we had in the works on quantifying the number of adaptation and resilience jobs in the US. We were having a hard time finding out how to capture information on this beyond the databases ASAP already had, and Rachel thought Maria might be able to help. Maria jumped right in and generously offered her time and expertise to this project. She walked us through searching databases to understand the demand for the jobs with adaptation and resilience skills, and compiled tons and tons of information that ultimately made this project possible. One of the awesome benefits of this network is the chance to learn from each other, and I really appreciate that Maria took the time to share her knowledge in addition to pulling together all of the information. So it's been a tremendous effort, and I'm really appreciative of Maria's time, thoughtfulness, and knowledge. Thanks, Maria. Cheers to you. Thanks so much for everything you do for ASAP.
Oh, thank you for having this network.
That's
Thanks,
awesome.
Maria.
That's so nice. Well, we're happy to hear other stories that members picked up, and feel free to share them in the chat. We know that there are so many stories across the ASAP network of members working together to advance excellence and center justice and equity in their work. We know that from the last year, from the spring of 2020 until now, we've seen over 1,000 person hours of engagement across our programs. That's included hundreds of individuals engaged in group meetings, and over 33 people and 33 members who have served in leadership roles. And ASAP functions as a network model, and it's successful in its network model because our programming only grows as members step up to lead it. And so Sean's getting called in the chat for his story.
Let's
I'm
hear
getting
it.
called out.
Yeah, a little bit.
And for Sean for doing that.
Well, this is already covered in, I think, the what is it? Recent update from ASAP. But yeah, I along with my colleagues worked on updating some Jedi language into the 21 funding opportunity for the RESA program. And one of the key things we looked at was the Jedi language that ASAP had. And, there's a lot of stuff to look at out there, but there's also a lot of stuff that really doesn't go quite far enough. And a lot of stuff, this was the model to us, but not even something that we can necessarily fully adapt to a federal program opportunity. But something that has considerations like power relationships and what you have to really think about when thinking about the deepness of researchers working in places across the country. So I think that has been a starting place for us, and I am really thankful for everyone that's been a part of the JEDI committee thus far, and the continuation of everyone working on that, because I really personally need to have friends and allies that are thinking about how to apply this all around us, and I see it happening here. So thank you for being there and not treating it like a one and done thing, but continuing to be reflexive and work on these issues.
Thank you, Sean. And I think the huge shout out on that really goes out to Vanessa Luke and Galen Troyer and Shamika Hansen and Julia Kim and Sharon Hausum and Alex Basaraba, who have formed a leadership team that have been really amazing at demonstrating what it looks like to step up when you can and step back when you can't, and be transparent about your capacity to keep that work going. I've learned so much from watching them and the way that they work as individuals and the way they work together. Michael McCormick, you have a story you want to tell?
Well, it's a little bit of a
Naturally.
story. So, okay. Emily has been an inspiration since I first met her in 2014 when she was the Global Change Research Program. I was doing a secondment at the White House Council on Environmental Quality. And like I was doing some regional in California. She was working on stuff at USGCRP. And we did this crazy mind melt. And it has turned into like this crazy engine of innovation that through regional governance. There's like 45 regional climate collaboratives now. And, think back to that day, there were maybe 10 at most across the country. And this was 5 years ago, 6 years ago. So anyway, it's like a core part of my business. And running my company and doing regional governance and helping to start collaboratives. And like I credit those early conversations in 2014 and 2015 and staying engaged with Emily, because like you, Beth, Emily's like this constant inspiration for balance between in life and work. And, somehow she's always presenting an optimistic side. And I know, Emily, that's not always true, but you're at least presenting it. And it takes me forward, because sometimes I think, what would Emily do? And it does bring me forward. And I know we don't talk very much anymore, Emily, but I think we should change that in the coming years. And so anyway, thank you for your inspiration and your leadership and for being a partner on building great things.
Michael, I'm blushing over here. Thank you so much. You're sweet.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that if you've ever been to an ASAP event, one of the standing rules is it's not over till Beth cries. It happens sooner or later in all of these, because I really do love this work and I love hearing about all of you. I do want to say, I think it was Stephen Mack in the comments or in the chat earlier was saying, what is this? It's 4 o'clock in California, you don't want to be drinking. And that's totally fine. Be festive, do what you're comfortable with. I am drinking something called AHA, which is caffeinated sparkling water. So, we all have our ways of celebration here. So, Brianna, I want to ask you to join me as we talk about all of the ways in which members have been stepping up and leading ASAP work over the last year. And so one of the ways that I think is most known are through our member-led interest groups, our Climate Migration and Managed Retreat group, the Private Sector for Adaptation Professionals group, and our Diverse Adaptation Drivers and Approaches. And the names here are the names of the leaders of those groups. Also our Policy Practice group and our Professional Opportunities and Adaptation group.
And then next we want to recognize our leaders of all of our affiliated groups, from our Network of Networks group to our Reconnect Personal Resilience group and our Community Adaptation Learning Exchange, CALE.
And we want to recognize our standing committees and also our staff and our interns, our board of directors, the JEDI committee, and the team that works in the internal operation here. Additionally, other standing committees or our flexible committees are our network meeting planning committee, our strategic planning committee, and the micro grant selection committee.
And we also want to recognize all of those that have supported the Private Sector Climate Service Providers Academy through the advisory group.
We want to recognize everyone who's made the mentorship program possible. Our mentees, of course, but at the background of that, our mentorship program co-chairs and our mentors who step up and offer their time and their knowledge and wisdom to both learn with and learn from our mentees.
And we want to recognize the other folks who have helped support different ASAP products, like we heard Maria Hart with the adaptation jobs fact sheet and other things like RFIs that have been put out by the SEC, as well as FEMA, and our Rise and Shine yoga program that we've offered weekly. And it's been a great space for members to connect and restore together.
Yep. This year, we launched a new program called our ASAP Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Fund. We were overwhelmed by the response that this fund received and people donating to this fund. The fund is designed to transfer money to Black, Indigenous, people of color, and people from low-income backgrounds who are working in climate change adaptation and want to be compensated for the time and knowledge and wisdom they're bringing to the field or for their professional development. So I want to thank all of the donors who have helped us to launch this fund this year. And then I also want to make sure that we thank all of our ASAP General Fund donors. General Fund donations enable us to continue thinking creatively and flexibly, you know what I mean, about how we can continue growing and creating a network that supports and connects all of you. And so, without further ado, and I see a question in the chat, Susie Mosier is asking for a link to our Jedi Fund. I think that Rachel just dropped that in. I'm going to change our slides over and we're going to head into a new and really fun opportunity to be learning more about a few members who are part of our network. And so this session is going to highlight a diversity of members who have been experiencing accomplishments, wins, changes over the last year. We're going to talk with Bella Schultz, Jessica Whitehead, Michael McCormick, Jackie Patterson, Melissa Diaz, and Natalie Cruz Daniels about what have they been up to, and hopefully it'll be an opportunity for all of us to kind of share in the diversity of experiences that members are all having across this organization. So to start with, I invite Bella to join me. Oh, and I need to put up.
Yeah, we can't see our slides just yet. There we go.
Perfect. Awesome. So Bella is a 2020 graduate of the Honors College at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, where she designed her own major in environmental sociology to study climate change and the human-nature relationship. Since her graduation, she served through AmeriCorps as a biodiversity outreach coordinator for the Nature Conservancy, where she leveraged her love of writing to develop communications about international conservation strategies. Now that her service term is over, she's looking forward to taking a break to visit her family in Spain for the first time in 2 years, including her 3- and her 5-year-old baby brothers. But despite her travel, she's actively looking for what her next step could be in the adaptation career. And so, Bella, I know you're somebody who's been putting a lot of time and work and energy into kind of looking at what are the resources in the field, what are the connections? And so I'd love for you, as somebody who's pretty early in your career, tell us about what are some of the resources and connections that have been helping you?
Hi, everyone. As Beth mentioned, I am part of the lucky cohort who graduated in the very beginning of the pandemic. So I experienced right out the gate about more than a year of unemployment, even though looking, search, applying, doing everything quote unquote right. So I started compiling a list of resources and tips and things like that. But I truly believe that everyone's heard them all 100 times already, and I wanted to really touch on what really helped me more than any certain color or anything like that. It is quite appropriate to this meeting itself, which is the connections that I made, and that, of course, is networking. We've all heard that over and over again, but relationship building, more so creating those relationships for more than just moving in your career, but learning from each other. I absorbed so much wisdom from everyone I met over that year. I am proud to say I have a 3-month span of time where I have an unbroken chain of connections, where I asked one person I talked to introduce me to someone else, and that person, and so on and so forth, and just really felt such, although unemployment can be so isolating, I didn't feel isolated because of that effort that I put into it, and because of things like that and these connections that you're creating here and now. So that is number one. I was really astounded and humbled by some people I spoke with were willing to put it all out there to advocate for me, even after one phone call. And I'm really excited to pass that on when I'm in a position further down the line in my career. And then second thing, not a resource and not particularly a specific connection, but something that really helped me when I was looking for my next step was to remind myself and to remember that learning doesn't end. Learning is lifelong, and we'll hear that also again and again. It was a real shift in my perspective that was necessary for me to remember. Learning can also be a way to stay directed and a way to stay involved in something that I'm passionate about, even when doors feel like they're just closed on all sides. Being able to learn these members and otherwise has been also a really wonderful asset to the search.
Awesome. I love that, Bella. I think that, at ASAP, we talk about all the time the need for continued education and continued growth, and especially for a field that we're all sharing and growing together, which is that, I don't want to say that we're all making it up as we go, but if you're not learning in this, you might be doing it wrong. And so I love that message that learning continues. We're having a little bit of challenge with your audio, so I'm going to turn off your video so that we can keep our conversation going. And hopefully that's going to give some more bandwidth. Hopefully the internet will smile upon us. And so, what are some of the changes you want to see in the future of adaptation? As all of us are learning together, where do we need to be thinking about change that's coming down the line?
Sure, yeah, please flag if this doesn't improve, but I'm holding my microphone literally right in front of my mouth, so hopefully that will help. I believe I'm preaching to the choir here, but the very first answer that I would give to that is the need for justice and equity to be deeply interconnected and integrated into adaptation work. Adaptation tends to be focused on planning and for the future, and oftentimes, from what I've seen, sometimes can forget that adaptation has been happening for decades and is happening in the present out of urgency. Bringing those people on the front lines of climate change and adaptation into the conversation and into the solutions is, I think, the number one priority for the adaptation field. And I see adaptation as a response to what systems have created, and therefore adaptation cannot be divorced from creating new and better systems that serve us, serve all people. And so to that end, I would love to see more social science come into play with adaptation. It's easy for me to say, that's my background, a little bit biased, but I believe that, social scientists, sociology, psychology all have a really strong role to play in helping to create those, the future, the new future that we are envisioning and the steps to getting there, particularly as adaptation is deciding how we maintain what makes us human when the ground is literally shifting beneath our feet. So yes, justice and equity, social sciences, I think, are two essential pieces.
I love that. Thanks, Bella. I really appreciate it. Your audio is a little rough, but I think everybody is nodding heads, snapping fingers, commenting in the chat that, yeah, that story is coming straight through. So I just want to thank you for sharing those insights and for being willing to kind of come out and have this conversation. I really have admired the passion that you bring to this work and the way that you're centered in it in a way that I think like we all need to be changing our careers and changing the way that we think about wherever we are on the path. And so thank you so much for sharing where you are and what you want to see in the changes from the adaptation community and the way that we take on our work in the future. And this is where we would all like snap and everybody would cheer and you can make cheer hands and snapping hands. Yes.
Thank you all so much.
Awesome. So my next guest on my Adaptation Today talk show is Jess Whitehead. And, you know, Jess Whitehead has been shaking things up, shifting from one high profile and power position in the climate adaptation sector to another. As Jess shared with me ahead of this, she's had the dubious distinction of never getting a job that existed before she stepped into the role, and her latest is no exception. She moved from being the first Chief Resilience Officer in North Carolina to the first Joan P. Brock Endowed Executive Director of the Institute for Coastal Adaptation and Resilience at Old Dominion University. ICAR is a national center that catalyzes adaptation and resilience in coastal communities by integrating knowledge and education to develop practical solutions. And Jess and her husband have also been taking on being part of a sandwich generation, really taking on caregiver responsibilities, both mother under the same roof. And this is a new challenge that's factored into her professional and her personal life in the time of making this move. In the meantime, or in the free time, which sounds like it must be scant, but it probably is then why you're part of a running group, a team turtle runner, and somehow still has managed to see the band Carbon Leaf more times than should be admitted in public, but this is definitely public, and I too have gone out of my way to see Carbon Leaf, especially in DC in the early 2000s.
Oh, well, are you seeing them this week because they're headed your way?
Oh, geez, now I feel called out. So Jess, I mean, you have so much going on, and you know we've known each other for a little while now. But how did you know it was time to move into a new role?
You know, it's going to be funny because you know you're supposed to step into this high profile role, and I think this is the first time anybody's told me it's high profile, so now I'm going to freak out about it.
Whoops,
but the you know, you're really going to talk about the wonderfulness of the role and how exciting it is and everything. And really the whole story backs up to about a year ago, my mom's dog died, which is the worst way to start a story. But he was 19 years old and this very, very well-lived, well-loved Jack Russell Terrier. And so a celebration of his life. And she had the year before a back surgery that did not reacquire her the mobility that she had been hoping to get. So a lot of people had seen the ODU position. In fact, I had been contacted by ODU asking me to apply for it the year before, right after I'd become Chief Resilience Officer. And I said, oh, that sounds like a really great thing. I just took on this Chief Resilience Officer thing. Here's my electronic Rolodex, which basically looks like an ASAP member, you know, the member role for ASAP, and sent them on their way, hoping that I would get one of you in the region pretty close to North Carolina, and it would be great. And it ultimately hadn't worked out, but right around the time that my mom's dog died, you know, we were a few months into the pandemic, she said, you know, I don't know how much longer I want to live on my own, but I'm not ready for assisted living yet. And it kind of got ball rolling with my husband and I going, oh, well, we have a house with the second floor. We'd have to all move. What happens, obviously I was appointed by North Carolina's Governor Roy Cooper. What happens 4 years from now? Can she move now? Can she not move 4 years from now when this appointment is over? All of these things, in the back of my mind when ODU called again and said, hey, we had something, it didn't work out. Would you be willing to reapply? And so this time I kind of thought, well, the timing is good. I don't know what the timing is going to be like 4 years from now, when I'm probably looking for another job anyway. And, I guess I'll hear them out. And so I went into it pretty open-minded. I channeled my best inspiration from Margaret Davidson in the interview, with absolutely no holds barred, no truths held back. And next thing you know, much to my surprise, they were enthusiastically offering me the job, and I was enthusiastically saying yes.
Awesome.
I was really wondering, Norfolk's had all of this, adaptation, work that's been going on in the Hampton Roads region. They were one of the early adopters in the Southeast. What do I have to bring to it? But, I was really talking through a lot with my supervisors at Encore, Laura Hogshead, who's the COO, and Mike Sprayberry, who just retired as the Director of Emergency Management. And then even, Susan White, my previous boss at North Carolina Sea Grant, and Frank Lopez. And, really talking through them about what I had to offer. And I realized, hey, this is something that I can go and do, and I have something to bring to the table. I think that the experience that I had at Encore was really, really valuable, because I thought that I knew how things worked. And oh my goodness, when you come in and you're having to think about procurement and
not sure that everyone knows I don't know if everyone knows what ANCOR stands for.
Yeah, so ANCOR was the North Carolina Office of Recovery and Resiliency. And they're charged with dispersing the HUD CDBG DR funds and CDBG mitigation funds after Hurricanes Matthew and Florence. And the resilience staff there is just incredible. Are doing everything that they can to try to work resilience into the disaster recovery, and then continue to advocate for funding from the General Assembly to more holistically address resilience matters within the state. And Dr. Amanda Martin has taken over as Chief Resilience Officer. She is incredible. And Marletta Bird, and they're building the team, and it's all going really, really great. So even though I wasn't there for very long, it was a great time and a great team who said, hey, we really appreciate everything you did to help us get set up, but you need to go and do this thing now, because you're not just your job, you're also, your personal life and your family, and this new role that was just much easier to step into and make a move now, as opposed to when we absolutely had to make a move because we had no other choice.
Yeah. So, I think there's a lot in what you've shared already, but if you can imagine this question of what was something that you feel like you've taken with you, and what was something that you were glad to leave behind?
Yeah. So one of the conversations is I was trying to work through whether to do this with Mike Sprayberry. And for those of you who don't know Mike Sprayberry and have never seen him on a press conference during a hurricane in North Carolina, he is exactly the kind of person that he'll call your friends, call your loved ones, call your family, that kind of guy. He used to text me climate change articles on the weekends to show me he was doing his reading. So Mike really, said to me, you've got to think about all of your experiences as being threads in your life, and all of these things that you need and are supposed to carry through to be able to do the next thing that you need to do. And so I loved this question because it's exactly the way that Mike put it to me when I was trying to decide whether or not to do this. And I think, the experiences that I had, even going back to Sea Grant, of working with communities and letting them lead, and be the ones who are identifying what their local needs are, because adaptation is not going to look the same in each place, is one of those threads that I carried through as Chief Resilience Officer, and trying to say, all right, how do we build programs that support communities where they are throughout the state? But then I think what I'm carrying through here in Virginia is the lessons that we learned. Hurricane Florence hit North Carolina a year ago tomorrow night. And, that experience, while not all of Hurricane Florence was climate change related, it was, powered up in intensity and the amount of rainfall that it had by climate change. And that experience lets you really, really see that, yes, there are projects and engineering things that you can be doing that will help, but that's not going to solve everything. It's not going to solve the problems of not having enough affordable housing when places have no longer become inhabitable. It's not going to solve the issues of injustice in who is first and worst affected from climate change, and the social networks that you need to build, the attention to economics that you need to build. And that's honestly been a piece that's been missing in Virginia. Virginia is very, very focused on, we're going to get the projects and we're going to save everything and it's going to be great. Well, you're not going to create a project that saves everyone. You're not going to create a project that it's the one project that serves everyone in the Commonwealth. It's going to need to be different from the Northern Neck to Hampton Roads. And it's going to really need to think about justice, because so many of these projects leaves people out. I think, that's what I'm carrying through here. And I think that, Mike was very clear, you've got this opportunity because you're supposed to go be there. You need to be there for some reason. And I think that's why I'm here.
Thanks, Jess. Thanks for being here tonight and sharing that story. I know that, I'm touched to hear that the story of how you've been able to marry the professional and the personal, and how it really supports your whole being. And I love the story of thinking about the threads. I love to look at spider webs, and I also like to imagine our kind of threads through space and time. I'm a little bit of a sci-fi geek, in case folks didn't know that. And so just where you touch on that thread is always going to ripple to another spot. I'm sure you're going to continue doing this incredible transformational work up the East Coast. So thank you.
Thank you.
So I am excited now to introduce our next two speakers, and our two speakers who've been really making some changes over the last year. Jackie Patterson and Michael Mccormick are long-loved leaders in the adaptation and resilience community and work, and each of them have made decisions in the last year to strike out on their own endeavors. Jackie Patterson, who was long the NAACP's Director for the Environmental and Climate Justice Program, has now started the Chisholm Legacy Project, which endeavors to be a one-stop site for speakers, consultants, hires, board members, advisory groups, steering committee members, and more for those who say, but I couldn't find any people of color. The program carries on the legacy, of course, of Shirley Chisholm, who was in 1968 became the first Black woman elected to the US Congress, amongst many other feats which she carried out. And so, Jackie, I'm so glad that you are joining us. And Michael Mccormick we already heard a little bit from Michael as he gave his cheers to Emily. Michael, you gave me so many things that I could say about you, but to say just a few pieces of these. He founded the Civic Spark Governors AmeriCorps Initiative in California, served in the White House CEQ, has been part of really pushing climate adaptation and resilience forward in California, has served with Governor Brown and Governor Newsom, and for many people, perhaps in this community, saw him serve as the chair of the last time we were gathered together for the 2019 National Adaptation Forum. And this year has struck out on his own with the formation of Farallon Strategy Consulting, which has been launched to be a transformational catalyst of change in climate and resilience, and as we will hear more about, is named for his daughter and a vision for the future. And so thank you to both for being here. And I'm going to start out with a question for both of you, which is, what made this the right moment for kicking off a new organization or kicking off a new company? And Jackie, I'd love for you to tell us first.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, so first off, it's an honor to be here with you all, and appreciate your interest in this little story. So first off, the moment really was, there's such a level of demand for what we were doing at the NAACP Environmental and Climate Justice Program. And at the same time, because of the racial awakening and so forth, the NAACP was in a major place of transition and transformation itself. And at the same time, the Environmental and Climate Justice Program, because of the climate crisis happening at the same time and the intersecting with the racial awakening, we were really experiencing an extreme level of demand. And so while the organization was in transition, and so in some ways it was slowing down some of the work, we were being called to do so much more. And so it just felt like we couldn't really, we tried to kind of hang in there to see if things were going to be able to accelerate, but that just, it didn't seem like it was coming imminently. And with the climate clock ticking and with all this that we were seeing happening in the world, we really felt like we needed to have the space to grow. And so what you described in terms of the Chisholm Legacy Project is just one small slice of it. It actually has 4 components. 1 is community building. 2 is kind of bending the arc of mainstream environmentalism towards equity and justice. 3 is movement building, and 4 is support, particularly for Black women's leadership. And so it has, we have multiple training and certification programs as part of it. We're working with freedmen settlements, for areas that were originally founded by enslaved persons, and so much more, because we really feel like we need to rise to the moment of this crisis and of the need that we're seeing.
Yeah. So do you feel like this, in some ways, it sounds like both within NAACP and in the world at large, like, was this pushed into being through what we've been experiencing in the last year? Was this the kind of fulfillment of a vision and a plan that you had in mind? Like, how much of this was because of versus like in spite of what's happened over the last year around us?
Yeah, I mean, so in some ways, the vision that we had been building towards at the NAACP, and we saw this already as the year to really fully launch that vision, or really last year. And then at the same time, with the racial awakening happening, then, like I said before, it kind of brought the NAACP to a point where it was in transformation itself. And meanwhile, the demand was such because of the combination of the racial awakening, the climate, the kind of acuteness of the climate crisis, and recognizing that the climate clock is ticking. It was definitely an inflection point of all these things happening at once, where we just couldn't afford to wait any longer to build into the level of programming that we were building up towards. Yeah.
Yeah. So Michael, I want to invite you in. You have, had a hand in so many different kinds of adaptation, resilience, regional resilience building. How was this the right time? Like, maybe start backwards from that. Was it in spite of, was it because of, like, what, another birth of another Farallon for you?
That's true. I guess I do have 2 Farallons now. It's COVID is such an interesting time, right? Leaving the Brown administration, I went to work at a medium-sized engineering and consulting firm with the intent and with the CEO's blessing as a change agent to help bring sustainability and resilience deep into the ecosystem of how the company functioned. Well, needless to say, it was much more difficult than anticipated to change an organization that had been around for 4 decades. Emily, maybe you and I could probably commiserate over that. But what I found was that I wasn't in a place where I could be a unique force of change. And I was looking for a place that, with my unique set of skills and background and network and capabilities, like, how can I truly make the most change where somebody else really wouldn't be able to make that change? And obviously, I've been working on climate change for 20 years. It's been an emergency for 20 years. And it's no more an emergency now than it was 20 years ago. We're just seeing the same effects that we knew were going to occur 20 years ago, right? Like, and so I struggle with the balance of, hey, this is an urgent thing we have to spend 24 hours a day working on and no sleep. So many of us are there, right? Yeah. But what I found was that I really loved people, right? I love the people in the space. I love the trust community has. I love working with people that want to make communities better, have that perspective in mind. And I wasn't getting that through some of the work that I was doing before. And I've been kind of wanting to start my own company since probably 2005. And just wasn't, I just didn't have the trust in myself. I didn't have the motivation. And the stars kind of aligned and said, look, Michael, you've got a unique opportunity. You've got a network to do great things while in a pandemic when nobody can talk to each other, because I've got this great group of folks that I can tap into. My kid, I started a school at my house. We created a COVID pod, hired a teacher. So I was the facilities manager. And I'm in my old tool shed out here. I don't have any air conditioning, so I'm in Florida. It's 100 degrees out here in Davis, but I'm here with you. I've got my beverage. Right, like, it's just kind of wild. I took a massive pay cut, but it was like, I'm doing the work that I love. My wife is supportive. My kid, I could spend quality time with her. I grew a great garden this year. I spent a lot more time with my community, supporting nonprofits, got into food security, got involved with Black Lives Matters. I mean, the amount of time that was going into running a company during COVID, running a traditional consulting and engineering firm during COVID wasn't the place I needed to be. Mm-hmm. And it gave me an opportunity to step forward into a space that I was really uncomfortable stepping forward into, but I'm really happy I'm here now. And Christina Oreftik, who's my newest colleague at Fairlawn Strategy, she's on the call too, that just joined me a few weeks ago. There's 3 of us, and we're doing really cool work. And we're starting more climate cores. We're starting new regional collaboratives. We're doing all that cool stuff that really is needed to fill the gap in governance and capacity. That we need to do that adaptation work. And it's fun.
I think what's interesting, what I hear from both of your stories, is it's easy to feel like starting something new can be severing something or really stepping away. And what you're both telling me is that your new endeavor is this kind of continuation of the strength in the network and the community that you have each developed and had. Is that fair? Is that a fair takeaway?
In my case, yes, definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. The culmination of relationships and experiences and networks built over the past 20 years of climate. I mean, it's why I'm able to do what I'm able to do. Think about, like, okay, folks that didn't have the network that this group has through ASAP, for example, starting a company or a new effort, not just ASAP, but NAACP, relationships we've built through our career. Like, it's a unique time in history where people have existing networks, have so much more leverage over their choices, because we don't have to meet new people to have opportunity. And the COVID has pushed us into this situation where most people are not meeting new people. We're not having those conferences, those workshops, those parties in the hotel rooms during those early ASAP and National Adaptation Forum meetings. That's where you build these great relationships and trust. And I mean, this kind of a venue is great, but it really doesn't beat that in-person dynamic on building that network and those relationships that you can tap into to do new things.
So as you're each growing the organizations, what are you looking for from ASAP, and what are you looking for from your fellow members?
Well, if Jackie's not going to go, I'll definitely step in. You know me, I don't hesitate on my personal perspectives. Look, I want to support ASAP. You know this, Beth, from our conversations, right? I want to support this network and the growing collaboration that we have here. It's a trusted space to collaborate and build new initiatives. And I think that the members should feel comfortable reaching out to other people in the ASAP network and really start connecting with people. You know, it's very rare when a trusted group of people can come together. And I've been on both sides, right? I've been in the work profile of people that don't trust each other, that are competing against each other in a space. And this space is not that space. This space, we're working together to solve huge issues in society. And we have to trust each other to push that stuff forward. And the only way we can do that is to work together. And yeah, I run a private firm, but I like to see myself as everything that I'm trying to do to build my private company is focused on creating flexibility to maximize the benefit on our community and grow this ecosystem of practitioners in a way that, we can do amazing stuff together. So I would just say, let's all just keep driving and working this stuff together as hard as we can.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael. Jackie, anything from you before we continue?
Yeah, no, just echoing that with all that needs to be done in terms of this work and the changes we need to see, being a part of a network of aligned, similarly focused, but yet diverse and from various walks of this work has been very it's been generative, because we have conversations, we build synergies, but then we also complement as well. So especially now with starting the Chisholm Legacy Project, even though it is a continuation, it also is a moment to be able to say, what are the possibilities here? And so being able to have a group of folks with whom one can explore possibilities, really take dreams and make them reality is really a very gratifying space. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for sharing and congratulations on taking on new endeavors. I think that it's really exciting to do new and different things. So our next set of guests are coming to us because they're leading new initiatives and advancing their careers within their institution that they have been within. And when we were getting ready for this session, we couldn't help but to say that these institutions that Melissa and Natalie Cruz are coming from are, a pretty big government and a pretty large university, and they are not always known for their flexibility, being nimble, being ready for change, and yet here we've seen some really exciting and new things going on. So Melissa has worked for the District of Columbia since 2018, first at the Department of Energy and Environment, and beginning this past April at the Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management as the Acting Chief Resilience Officer. Melissa's work focuses on ensuring the district is prepared for a wide range of threats and hazards, addressing inequities and climate impacts, integrating future climate risks into design and planning, and promoting emergency preparedness. Before the district government work, Melissa worked on adaptation for the state of California, City of Boston, Union of Concerned Scientists, and with the Georgetown Climate Center. And she currently splits her time between Washington, D.C. and Norfolk, Virginia, but is counting the days until she can be where her and her husband can be in the same city. Natalie is a professor of environmental studies at the Voinovich School of Learning and Public Service at Ohio University. And they have just launched a new online Masters of Sustainability, Security, and Resilience degree to help professionals gain the skills and meet their community or organization's need in a changing climate. She's a long-term researcher in water quality, treatment, characterization, and management. And she lives on a small farm in southern Ohio with her husband and her 3 young children. And I will say this is now the second time I've ever been on a call with Natalie without the baby. And it's good, but I also really like the baby being here. So just say, in case anyone needs to bring a baby along, I'm all for that. So each of you, you're at institutions that are maybe not known for being nimble and agile and changing, and yet there you are. You're introducing a new graduate degree program. You're advancing your career. I mean, Melissa, I think it's like I'm so tickled to become like the adults in the room on adaptation. And when I see sometimes what you're doing, what I'm doing, I'm like, oh wow, we're really growing up here. And so maybe Melissa, I'd love to start with you. How did you know it was time to move into this new role? From where you were at the district to what you've tackled now?
Yeah, I can't say that it was something that I totally thought out. I more or less slid into this position by mistake. When COVID happened, I had been working with our emergency management agency for years before that because they're a key partner in getting a lot of our resilience work funded. And implementing it. But when COVID happened, I knew that they were going to be leading the charge, and I immediately sort of raised my hand and said, whatever help you need, please call me in. And they ended up putting me in charge of a lot of our recovery planning initiatives. And I was, monitoring whether the district was seeing any signs of recovery, whether we were getting to a place where things were getting worse, sort of all of those pieces through COVID and working with this group every day. And then they sort of made an attempt to keep me. And then at that same time that they were making an attempt to keep me, was when our chief resilience officer left to the federal government. And so created a space for that. And so, as I said, I sort of ended up sliding into this new role. And, it was definitely a decision still, even though it is a bigger role and an exciting role. And I think one of the reasons why I was really drawn to it is, as I had said before, our emergency management agency is the one that actually applies for and gets all of the funding that comes into the district through FEMA. And matching money to projects has been one of the most challenging things in working in local government and adaptation, because there isn't just giant sources of flexible money that you can necessarily go get. And so it was a really exciting opportunity.
I don't think you said how much money the district has coming in.
Yeah, so I think one of the exciting things of this new role is that through BRIC and the flood mitigation assistance program, we were able to pull in $45 million this year. And so that is a huge success for us. 96% of the funding that we applied for was received in the district. So I think that puts us on top in terms of all of the states in terms of a success rate. Puts us, even though we are just the district, which is relatively small, in the top 5, I believe, of states receiving funding. So that is huge and means that we actually have funding to get things done. And so that was one of the huge attractions to this job. Getting funding through FEMA is definitely putting a round peg into a square hole and just jamming it in and seeing what works. And so I knew that there were going to be a lot of frustrations with this job. And it is a process that I'm happy to talk to other folks about if you have questions about how to be successful. But it is also the key to getting projects moving forward. So I'll pause there.
Awesome. So Natalie, I'd love to bring you in, and there's this BRIC money out there. There's, I think, an idea that we all hold that there will be some more funding for adaptation and resilience, and I tee it up that way because in academia, right, you need to convince people that something is going to be needed. And how have you been able to make that change, and how have you been able to garner the support of your university to launch this new degree program?
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me part of this. So I have to say has been and remains a long and intense process. So one of the things that really worked in our favor is that we're in this School of Leadership and Public Affairs, and so we have Leadership and Public Service. We just changed our name. So we have this public service mission, and our school works with communities on environmental projects and energy and health and education and policy and economic development and entrepreneurship. And so we come from this place where we've been able to engage with communities on all these really clear issues, and as we watch now these same communities dealing with the realities of climate change, and our students grappling with these issues of adaptation and resilience and where they're going in their careers, we kind of saw this opening to help fill a training role to allow people from the public sector and the private sector and nonprofits to upskill, to kind of address new realities. And so we were able to frame it in that. And I think that the thing is that right now, I think what Michael said was really real, that, we've been seeing this coming for a really long time, but so many people are now recognizing these day-to-day impacts of climate change. And so when you can talk to the state board that has to approve your degree and say, well, look at all these things that have happened in our state, in our region, and nationally and internationally, there's a need for this. That helps you then build that argument. And we're really lucky to be able to build from and learn from ASAP's knowledge and competencies framework, and in building out, how we meet that need. And so I think that, we had to move through a lot of gears and a lot of both university and state processes, but we have this, this true need that we're able to meet, and that has gone a long way in convincing people.
That's awesome. One of the reasons that ASAP was founded was it can often feel like lonely work. And even when you're in a big institution, it can be a corporation, a government, a university. Being an adaptation professional can feel like you're the only one who kind of gets it. And the ASAP network seeks to do a lot of things, but at its core, it seeks to be there for the people and to alleviate that sense of doing it alone. And yet you two are bringing your institutions with you, or perhaps they're there. And so how do you feel like your institution supports you as an adaptation professional?
So I think in some ways I'm really lucky to work in district government in Washington, D.C., which is a city where I don't spend a lot of time having to work through people who are denying climate change or any of that. There's sort of a base level acceptance of some of this work. And that's one of the reasons why I have chosen to and have so far stayed in city government, is that you're at the jurisdictional level where you can actually get things done, where you can find the funding, work with other agencies, work with stakeholders, and actually see something built or accomplished. But there are definitely still challenges to moving things forward. And what I have found is the most effective way is networking within your organization, and making sure that people are part of the process from the very beginning. So, my first role within district government was to implement a plan that has 77 strategies, none of which had funding attached to any of them. And so what my strategy was to do is to find, the person in urban forestry that's really excited about the urban heat island and identifying which kinds of trees we should plant where to provide maximum shade. and getting them excited and empowered because they had all this funding to plant trees and they could make important decisions about that, about finding the community members in our community that is going to most disproportionately impacted by climate change, and one of our lowest income communities, meeting with them once a month and getting them really excited and making sure that they can advocate to council, that they can help support applications for funding for the projects that they're really passionate about. Making sure that when we are putting together resilient design guidelines for the district, that we're pulling in our Department of Public Schools to be part of the process from the very beginning, because that's a huge piece of property that the district controls. And we modernize our schools on a rotating basis and making sure that they are excited and know that they can think about climate change every time they're doing one of those modernizations. So it really is, networking in a group like this is hugely helpful, and many people, including Michael being one of my original mentors, in getting ideas, and then also networking within the organization that you're working.
Yeah. And Natalie, I mean, adaptation is and we think of it as a field, it's new. And so how have you been able to find support and been supported yourself at your institution?
So I think that's actually, there are some parallels with what Melissa's saying, in terms of, firstly that, our university sits in a small college town where within kind of the university community, we don't have this big community of climate deniers. In Appalachian, Ohio, you do. And so there's a whole science and people who are working in the university about communication, about hope, and about, how we engage a lot of our Appalachian communities. But we didn't have to necessarily convince people that climate change is real and climate change is a problem. But like you say, at a university, we end up in all of these silos. And so adaptation and resilience are new fields that don't fit into one of those boxes. And so I think that the way that the university has really kind of come on board with this is twofold. One is that we have developed kind of a community of practice around environment and climate at the university that cuts across engineering and economics and political science and sociology and geography and environmental studies and others to collaborate in really positive ways. And that kind of connects a lot with that networking within your organization that Melissa highlighted. And that's been really strong. And then the other thing is, even though it's a different lens and it's a different kind of framework, there's been a long-term push at the university on sustainability and sustainability planning, which, we're one of the first I think we're the first university in Ohio to have a sustainability office. And so that then has translated into climate adaptation work at the university. And so as that jumping off point that people understood more, that's now becoming more about that. And so while there's a lot of challenges, particularly to do with funding of projects, and again, kind of a lot of synergy with what Melissa's saying, there's a lot of this baseline understanding.
Yeah. So I can't believe how fast this time has gone by. Well, I kind of can, because I love these stories and I love hearing about the work that you're doing. But I want to ask for all of our speakers to come back on, and I'm going to stop this share and just have a few minutes for a conversation, which I think that really Michael and Jess got first grabs at what are the questions we want to talk about as a whole group. And so I'm going to put this out to you. Where do you want to see the adaptation practice in 5 years? What's your vision for where we're going together? And I would say this is to the speakers, but anybody who has an answer and you want to for where we should be in 5 years, I would welcome it.
I can start a little. So we ran into recently in California, regional climate collaboratives were formed out of a lack of governance, right? A lack of governance around organizations, jurisdictions that needed to work together to think about, like, what does adaptation look like for our region? And a bill almost made it through the legislature this year that would formalize regional resilience collaboratives, and maybe not the ones that were already there. And I think about ASAP, and part of the driver behind ASAP coming together when it did was a lack of representation and conversation and a collective engagement around this critical priority of climate adaptation. So I don't have an answer. What I do is I have a question. What happens in the next 5 years when the federal government, state agencies start formalizing adaptation governance that overlaps, exceeds, expands, or contracts through the ASAP network? How do we leverage that for increasing impact versus creating a lack of continuity in our network and how we build it? So it's just something I've been thinking about, but I don't have an answer. We'll solve climate. How's that?
Oh, well, I'll jump in on this one too. I mean, one of the things that I was seeing, and this is, if you know North Carolina politics, it's not exactly a single party situation there, but I saw, regardless of party in North Carolina, once you get to the point where everyone realizes you need to do something, there is a rush to be the decisive person who comes in and solves the problem. And I was on a panel with a North Carolina senator where he very clearly said, we know we need to be doing something. So the time for science projects is over. We don't need it anymore. And to me, that's a little bit dangerous to say that we have all of the information that we need to go in and do everything, because we don't. And so, I carrying on what Michael just shared, I think to make sure that we don't see that be the way that we charge forward, and really reinforce inequality in our rush to be decisive, that we need to come up with ways to to empower and enable this transition to a more resilient nation. And I think that universities have a role in that. I think we can be conveners. I think we can be places where we're training the next generation. Somebody may not necessarily be a resilience officer, although we want to train those future resilience officers too, but they might be a disaster case manager or a county manager who needs to have this competency in resilience, and the ways that we can bring people into that. And, really, I think make resilience and adaptation knowledge more accessible to everyone. I see us going in that direction within the next 5 years.
Yeah, adding to what has already been said and echoing a lot of it, I think I just want to see the tent grow in terms of what an adaptation professional looks like, and what kind of work we're doing. And that's something that I am actively trying to do in the district is, I think COVID showed, for example, how challenging it is when there are inequalities in internet access during a disaster. So is an Internet for All a resilience initiative? I would argue that it is. And so trying to make sure that we are thinking about those and that we're working with people who might not think of themselves as adaptation professionals, but giving them the skills and the knowledge so that they can make those connections and do that work. And then also just really pulling, and this is one of the things that I think ASAP does a great job at, is pulling in people from so many different disciplines that we really need to have the expertise, and from so many different communities and so many different perspectives and ages and race and everything that comes with that, so that we are bringing sort of all of the minds together to really start thinking about this more holistically, rather than sort of in the realm of environmental organizations where it has been born.
I would love to just kind of echo and build upon some of what Melissa said. This idea of broadening that umbrella and making some of that knowledge really accessible to all. I think that one of the real strengths of the community is that people are coming from these different types of adaptation professionals and different types of organizations, and that we can bring those different knowledge bases and these different competencies together to build the future of what that is. And like Jeff said, that science still needs to be built, the science still needs to be there. And so we need all of that to come together to advance what our communities look like. And I think that that's really where ASAP, lives at that kind of hub of bringing together all of these different pieces.
Mm-hmm. So I do feel like I have an answer to Michael's question, which I'm grateful to have one, but I feel like it's kind of sitting in this room, and that it is going to require people who work at all levels, and ASAP members do work at all levels, and ASAP members are often called on, whether it's in their communities, in their neighborhoods, in their states, or at the federal level, to talk about where is the field today. What is it that we need? And I think that if we are consistent in that message, that there's a constant need to bring forward adaptation work, which is rooted in what's happening from the ground up and identifying experts from the ground up, and not allowing new systems that are unnecessary. So there are new systems that are necessary, but then there is really ensuring that the work that is had foundation laid is seen and heard. And I think that people who are part of this community and connected to others really have an immense amount of power. And I think wielding that power for good is critical. And so that's one way that I hope that we will ensure that the next 5 years bring momentum to work that is hopefully what we've imagined and wished for, and won't end up being kind of redundant to, or worse yet, end up with something that is wholly top down and foreign from what we have hoped to build as something that is rooted in where people are, that knowledge, that wisdom, and the community that we've built. We're getting close to the top of our time, so I just want to leave this open for a minute before we begin to wrap our evening up. But such a rich question for us. What are the next 5 years? Anybody who would like to share in?
I'll add that, Beth and I have this conversation on probably a weekly basis, but, we're at a turning point where we really need to have transformational change. And I think I've said this to her as well, in terms of, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing again and again and hoping for a different outcome. And we just can't do that any longer. And I love the fact that we're part of a field that is working to fully integrate climate considerations into the way that organizations operate, into the way that communities, can help be more prepared. And I would love to see much more of a local presence with folks that are really on the front lines and working so tirelessly on this topic, like you all are, but really embracing the fact that, adaptation happens on both, a global needs to happen on both the global scale, but also at the very local scale that is community driven. And I'm starting to see a lot of that because there's a need for it. But I think in 5 years, I'm hoping that we won't even have to talk about climate deniers. And I'm hoping that we won't have to actually think about, how can we integrate climate considerations into decisions and investments that are being made, but it actually become streamlined. So that's what I hope for.
I'm not afraid of silence. I've done a lot of Zoom meetings.
Well, I'm fairly new to ASAP and to this group, and as I said, I haven't had many clients related to this topic, but what I've been exploring, to follow up on what was just said by Emily, is it's not only a need to do it at the community level, it's to make sure that we include all communities. As I've tracked this more and more, I find a lack of attention to suburban communities. I find a lack of attention, especially to rural communities and counties that are rural and urban. Because if we're talking about climate and the environment and so on, it cross-cuts all of our political boundaries, of course. But those are important ones where maybe we don't have the majority of people in the country living in them, but that's where the majority of communities are. They aren't in the big cities, and I'm a big city guy myself. And I'm also an anthropologist. And I know that the culture and the structures for governance and the availability of funding are quite different in some of these rural communities compared to big cities. Yet that's where we get the examples of climate change action is from the big cities. So I hope in 5 years, we'll have a more even distribution of information created by ASAP members.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephen, for being brave and stepping out to share in a group that's new for you. I appreciate it. So we're coming to the end of our time tonight. The good news is that we're going to continue these conversations over the next several days. Tomorrow's keynote address is going to talk about how do we balance urgency, the sense of urgency, and rooting our work in justice and equity. That conversation is going to be kicked off by Kyle White, who will be sharing his insights on this, and then followed by a member panel from folks who are working across North America. And I hope that, oops, there we go. And I hope that you'll join us for that. In the morning, we have our member-led sessions, the Jedi panel, a networking meal. So I invite you to come. It's a fun time. We set up rooms as folks arrive so that you can chat and have really as close as we can create, right? Together apart time. And then tomorrow night, we have more member-led sessions. As you're wondering where you might go and how you might use your member meeting time, I encourage you to look at the ASAP website. All of the member descriptions are there. Sorry, not member descriptions, but the session descriptions are there. And all of the guidance to get from room to room is available on that network connection sheet that I shared earlier. I want to thank you all for joining us. I want to thank you all for joining ASAP. I want to thank you all for the work that you do that brought you to this space, and for the guests that came on the talk show and shared just so much of like, not just the work, but the wholeness of who you are. Thank you so much for that. And I want to encourage everyone to find this conversation continuing through the Slack channel. You can hop on there and connect with others and, share lingering ideas and feedback and thoughts that you want to give. And I mean, Rachel won't think that this is enough, but anybody wants to stay and have some dance party time, I'm pretty sure that Brianna's going to help us turn on some music. And so, it's like, it's like a hotel lobby after the network event is over, but like we'll just be here, just hanging out for a while and happy to hang out with anybody who wants to who wants to stay for a little bit. But thank you all so much. I hope that you have wonderful evenings or afternoons, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow at the continuation of the network meeting.